Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen Kimball, Director of Membership and Individual Giving for Bat Conservation International. Thanks for tuning in today to learn more about our Cueva Del Diablo project that we're urgently raising funds for right now in order to protect the globally endangered Mexican long-nosed bat. I'm happy to introduce Dr. Ana Ibarra, Strategic Advisor, Endangered Species Conservation at BCI, who's been working on the ground in Mexico, laying the foundation for this work. Dr. Ibarra is a tropical ecologist and conservation biologist who's worked in bat conservation for almost 10 years now, mainly as a collaborator for the Program for Conservation of Bats in Mexico. Welcome, Dr. Ibarra. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, hello, everyone. I'm really glad to be here today, and I'm really glad you guys are here today for me to share a little bit of the story behind our latest campaign, Save the Caves, Save the Bats. So the culprit of our efforts now is the Mexican Longnosed Bat. The Mexican Longnosed Bat is one of the 3 migratory nectar-feeding bats in North America, and it's a colonial species that uses caves as their main roost, and they tend to form colonies of hundreds or even thousands of individuals. What you can see here is actually Cueva Del Diablo. On the red lightning picture, those are the bats in that cave. So as I mentioned, the Mexican Longnosed Bat is a nectar eater, and around 50 species of plants have been reported to be part of its diet, but mostly the species relies on agave flowers as the main food source along their distribution. In other areas, they will feed in other species as well. What you can see here, the white flower on the top is the main food source for the bat colonies in central Mexico, and it's called a cacahuate. So as I mentioned, the Mexican Longnosed Bat is a migratory species, spending specific parts of the year in certain areas along its distribution. The species spends the winter in central Mexico during the mating season. And they, in a specific cave that we will talk about later. In this mating roost in central Mexico, females and males gather for at least 5 months of the year, mating mostly around October and November. Around late February or early March, this colony disbands and start migrating north, with the females already pregnant. These females will travel north to reach maternity roosts in northern Mexico, and in the US, in Texas and New Mexico. And they will give birth and raise their young there until they're ready to start migrating south again to reach central Mexico. So along this migratory pathway, we know of around 30 caves that are or were Mexican Longnosed Bat roosts. Historically, most of these roosts were reported to have colonies of hundreds or thousands of individuals, but most of them are now abandoned or are used only sporadically. So for the past 10 years, we have only been able to record consistent use by sizable colonies in only these 6 sites, 2 of them in the US and 4 of them in Mexico. So this has led us to the conclusion that the Mexican Longnosed Bat has suffered important population declines, and it's now an endangered species for both the US and Mexico. And we think this decline is due to 2 main reasons: loss of foraging resources and loss of roosting sites due to human activities. One of these roosts that hold a consistent colony is the Cueva del Diablo that concerns us today. What you can see here is Cueva del Diablo at the bottom of your screen. And to the north, what you can see is Mexico City, the most densely populated city in Mexico. And Cueva del Diablo is also very close to Cuernavaca, which is the state of capital for Morelos, where Cueva del Diablo is. We go a little bit closer and we can see Cueva del Diablo sits right in the middle of different smaller towns. And what you can see here is Tepoztlán on your left. And San Juan, Santo Domingo, and Amatlán are the 3 main communities that own land in this area. This is an aerial view of Tepoztlán, the biggest town in the picture. And this city, being very, it has a lot of scenic and historical value. What you can see here is it's a building on top of the mountains that was dates from the pre-Hispanic era, sorry. And you can see the mountain ranges here are beautiful. And also historical value from the colonial era as well. And being so close to the city, being a beautiful landscape and this with cultural value, it attracts a lot of visitors from Mexico City mainly. So in this landscape, we have Cueva del Diablo sitting among different urban sites. And what you can see here is actually the map of Cueva del Diablo. Cueva del Diablo, it's a volcanic in origin, and it has around 2,000 meters of tunnels. Some of them are very small for people to go through, but they're great for bats looking for roosts. And what we did with our very limited resources, technical skills, we just laid that map that we have from 1986 onto the Google Earth image, so we can figure out where the tunnel sits in the landscape or in this area. And so Cueva del Diablo, this is the main entrance or the entrance for the bats, is the most important roost for the Mexican Longnosed Bat in central Mexico, because it is the only known mating roost for the species during 5 or 6 months in the winter. This is the only cave we have found where males and females get together, forming the largest concentration of the species in a specific site, in a very specific and sensitive time, giving where they give origin to the next generation. So here in this cave, there has been a long-standing effort, mainly from Rodrigo Medellin at the National University of Mexico, where they have been developing research and monitoring programs and conservation efforts for the last 20 years. So I was part of Rodrigo's team for around 5 years, and at that point I started working on this cave. And when I was part of the team, we started working in Cueva del Diablo and other roosts in this area. And most of the activities have been focusing on research, but also on connecting or building networks with authorities, local and federal, to make conservation possible, but also working with a large team of experts in the species from the US and Mexico in order to create the necessary tools for conservation as far as policy goes for the species in their whole range. So given the critical aspect of the cave for the species and concerns around its conservation, we have been constantly monitoring these roosts along the foraging resources for the species. As part of these activities, we have been conducting research, monitoring agave population, monitoring diet of the Mexican Longnosed Bat in this cave. But we have been also exploring the area to find those alternate roosts, either the historical roosts that are no longer used, and to determine what are the causes that these roosts have been abandoned and whether there is a chance they might be used again. And actually, as part of that effort, there was one of Rodrigo's students took made a huge study about the niche, or what are the conditions that make it possible for a cave to be a Mexican Longnosed Bat roost. And we have not been able to find any other roost in this area. So through these activities of monitoring and research, we have also been able to have constant presence in the area, and we have been able to monitor threats and how they are developing through time. So what you can see here, this is the landscape. On the left, you have the landscape, a piece of land right on top of the cave. And on the right, you have a house that sits right next to the cave entrance. If you see on the left of your screen, what you see here is that house that I just point to you right here. The house, that concrete house sits right next by the cave entrance. And the other problem with this is that there used to be a very isolated cases of people building houses, and they used to be very small houses. And you can see here, this is an image from 2005. You have the Cueva del Diablo entrance right there, marked by the red spot. And the yellow area is where we think most of the tunnels of the cave are located underground. And you can see there used to be one single house right there, isolated in all this landscape. Jump to 2011, and you can see how now development is spreading. We have a lot more houses in this area right on top of the tunnels. And that house that sits right next to the entrance is now present. And there are a lot more houses in the landscape. And this is almost 10 years ago. So the current condition is deteriorating faster than it used to be in the past. In recent visits to this area, what we have detected is that the area in the red triangle is being cleared. And this is one of the first steps, even though they have not built anything there yet. Clearing the land is one of the first steps before they start construction. So we think that that's going to happen very soon if we cannot stop it. And this is how it looks right there. So this cave is also attracts a lot of visitors, most of them adventure seekers that they left graffiti, and they left a lot of garbage behind, and they cause a lot of disturbance. Some of the times when in the past when we detected there was visits to the cave, there were visitors inside the cave. After those visits, we would see the bat colony moving inside the cave. And at 1 year, actually the colony decreased in size, and we think it was because of the disturbance. And as you know, and you've heard, like, we call this Cueva del Diablo, which is the devil's cave. And it also attracts a lot of attention from cultural traditions from the native communities. In Mexico, and I'm sure in a lot of other places in the world, caves are linked to, it's a link or a spiritual connection to the underworld and the essence of the afterlife. So they also attract a lot of attention from local communities. So right now, BCI has been working to support conservation of the Mexican long-nosed bats, addressing one of the main causes, which is the loss of foraging resources. And for that, BCI has the Agaves for Bats initiative. In that, with this initiative, what we're doing is we're supporting local communities in Northeast Mexico to restore and conserve agave habitat that provides the foraging resources necessary for the species to survive. And we do this through the effort of local communities that collect agave seeds in order to produce new plants that will go into reforestation efforts. And what we have here is a nursery or a greenhouse where local communities are producing the agave plants that eventually will go and be planted on the landscape. And this also includes works for soil retention and water retention and cattle management. That's one of the main issues here. So we also work building cattle exclusion areas where cattle is not allowed to go in. And so what we're trying to do is to go from this to this on your right, where it's like a healthy forest where agaves thrive. And now our latest campaign is Save the Caves, Save the Bats, because now what we really want to do is address the issue of losing critical roosting caves for the Mexican long-nosed bat, specifically Cueva del Diablo, which is the only known mating roost in central Mexico and the only known mating roost for the species. So what we are gonna do through this campaign or through this effort is, first of all, we want to make sure we really know the cave, its structure, and how it sits on the land. Because from this very not very specific map or image. We have to go through very specific mapping of the cave and how it sits underground. And this will help to develop management and conservation plans on the land level to protect the caves or the tunnels underneath, but also to assess the risks for people living on top of the cave, especially when if they're going to be building where they want to build houses. We need to demonstrate to them that that's not safe and it's a risk for their lives and their buildings. We also develop a land management plan along the community so we can detect and devote conservation areas, especially around Cueva del Diablo. We want to build this with the community, taking into account how they use their land, what are their traditions, but making sure that we include bat conservation and management into their plans. Part of this plan will include buying some of the land. So people that live or depend on this land, you can see this is the area that we have identified as priority to secure land rights. So there is no more development on top. But people already living here we will need to help them in some way after we secure the land for conservation. We will do this through several workshops, a long process of consults and design with local communities. And we have worked on this type of programs in other areas, but we want to apply it here as well. Finally, we want to include a very specific management plan for the cave because right now we don't have anything that enforces the proper visit or the proper management of the cave, so it's bat-friendly management. And we need to make sure we include that in a legally binding document that we can follow and the community back up. And we will sustain this through a long or a very wide outreach program. And some of those activities we have already implemented through the program for the conservation of bats in Mexico, but we will need to make sure that we have the long-term support from local communities. And for that, we plan to include this outreach program. So today I am asking to consider you to support the Save the Cave Cueva del Diablo so we can prevent the extinction of the Mexican Longnosed Bat. Karen?
Thank you so much for that. And I want to thank everyone who is here who's already generously stepped up to support this important work and to protect these endangered Mexican long-nosed bats. If you'd like to make a donation to this effort, you can visit our website, batcon.org/cave. If you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat box. We'll give you a couple of minutes for that, and hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions that you have. So we have a question about, let's see, have there been efforts to purchase the land outright?
What do you mean? Previous efforts to buy land?
Correct.
Yeah, no, not so far. We were trying to do it through other initiatives, but now we've reached the conclusion that this is the only long-term solution. And so that's why we're working on it now.
I'm not seeing any more questions come through. Oh, actually, there's one. Let's see. My daughter, who's 6 years old, wants to know what she can do to help.
She can spread the word, not only for bats in Mexico, but for bats where she lives or where you guys live, and spread the word, get to know them, get to know what they do for us and what we can do to help them survive and thrive. That's always very helpful. Kids are our biggest allies in most of our programs here.
Let's see, could this be a possible national park?
What we're trying to do this is to declare it as a sanctuary because of the size. It's a very small area, the one that we want to secure. So our aim is to declare it a sanctuary with specific rules for the management of sanctuaries in Mexico. I think that's our best option.
I imagine a sanctuary might have fewer visitors than a national park.
In Mexico, national parks work a little bit different than in the US, but yeah, sanctuaries have very strict rules, and sanctuaries are focused around one main species, and in this case, it would be a sanctuary for the Mexican Longnosed Bat.
Okay. How willing is the community to cooperate with the bat's efforts?
The community has been very open and helpful about bat conservation and cave conservation. And with most of these communities, we have worked with the kids, and they have open opportunities for us to work there. But we want to move from there to being just passive players into being active players, and we think we have built the foundations for us to do that. We think we have the support of the communities.
All right, I think, oh, every time I say I think that we don't have any more questions, we have a question. Do you think climate change has a negative effect on the bat population site?
Definitely. We are, especially with Mexican Longnosed Bat, one of our collaborators have been studying effects of climate change or of something as basic as agave flowering phenology. Climate change is predicted to change the phenology of the agave flowering seasons, which will affect, in this case, the Mexican Longnosed Bat. If we think in a migratory species, as this is the case, we need to consider that two things have to be very well synchronized, which is the traveling time of the bats and the time the flowers are available for them to eat. And climate change is already showing signs that some species, their phenology is going to change or is changing. And we had a case, not with this, the Mexican Longnosed Bat, with the lesser Longnosed Bat, the sister species, in years where the weather is off and the flowers, there's no flowering in the right time at the right site, colonies suffer. And one year we saw a high mortality of babies because mothers arrive at a time that food was not available, even though in previous years the food was already there. So we can see effects already, but these are just going to get worse as climate change worsens these patterns and set them off.
What is the Mexican government doing about this, and have they been helpful?
About this cave?
Correct.
Yes. So local authorities are collaborating with us. This is a complex matter that includes land ownership and land development initiatives. And the biggest support from the local authorities is just making sure that if land regulation are enforced, but they're not always very effective. And so the other way we do this is through federal authorities, and they support us, but they haven't been as effective as we needed. And the other thing is we need to consider that people already live here. So even if the law applies, people need to live from the land. So we rely on the authorities to make sure this doesn't speed up, but we cannot depend on those to put a stop to this.
I'm hesitant to say we don't have any more questions, but it looks like we don't have any more questions. So thank you so much for talking to us about the Cueva del Diablo project. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate